Joe Morgan was feeding his horses when the sky turned purple. At first he thought it might be a storm rolling in over the Montana mountains. Then he saw the shimmer of light that didn't belong in any weather pattern he'd seen in his 60 years. The ship landed in his south pasture. It wasn't big, about the size of the Airstream trailer his neighbor owned, but it definitely wasn't from Earth. Joe set down his feed bucket, wiped his hands on his jeans, and watched as a door melted open in the side of the craft. Well, he said to no one in particular, this ought to be interesting. The creature that stepped out sparkled like glass in the morning sun. It had a body shaped roughly like a human's, with 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. But that's where the similarities ended. Its skin, if you could call it skin, looked like thousands of tiny crystals all moving independently of each other. Joseph. Morgan, the crystal being said in perfect English. I am Kix of the Galactic Concord. We need humanity's help. Joe raised an eyebrow. You know my name, but you landed in my horse pasture instead of calling the president? Either you're not very good at this alien thing or this visit isn't official. Both observations are correct, Kix said. This visit is exploratory. The Concord High Council doesn't fully agree on contacting humans yet. 2 more aliens emerged from the ship. One looked like a giant blue octopus floating in midair. The other resembled a tall insect with 4 arms and eyes that moved independently of each other. You've got 10 minutes before I call the military, Joe said, though he wasn't sure if his cell phone would even reach out here. Make it count. Kix produced a small device that projected a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hundreds of stars glowed blue, while a growing black mass consumed one edge. This is the Void Dominion, Kix explained. They are consuming entire star systems, converting all matter into more of themselves. The Concord, 17 advanced species, working together, has been unable to stop them. We've lost 8 border worlds in less than 1 orbit of your planet around your sun. And what do you want from us? Joe asked. Earth isn't exactly a spacefaring civilization yet. The insect-like alien clicked something that Kix translated. We want what you humans do best. War. Later that day, in a secure conference room deep beneath the Pentagon, Admiral Susan Bell listened as 3 human diplomats explained what they'd learned from the aliens who had now been officially invited to speak with Earth's leaders. Let me see if I understand, Susan said, looking at the same holographic display Joe Morgan had seen hours earlier. For 300 years your people have known about us. You've monitored our progress, occasionally taken samples, and deliberately kept us isolated from the galactic community because we're too violent and unpredictable. Yes, Kix replied simply. And now you want our help because we're violent and unpredictable? We kept you as our last resort, Kix said. That time has come. The president, sitting at the head of the table, leaned forward. Why would we help you? You've basically admitted to treating us like animals in a zoo. The octopus-like alien waved its tentacles and Kix translated. Because the void doesn't discriminate. When they finish with our worlds, yours will follow, and alone you cannot stop them. Admiral Bell studied the alien map, noting the rate of expansion. They're right. Based on their advance, Earth has maybe 5 years before contact. What exactly do you need from us? The president asked. Your military minds, your adaptive tactics, your... Kix seemed to search for the right word. Willingness to do what other species consider unthinkable. Videos began playing on the walls, showing recordings of human history. World War II, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan. Soldiers running into fire to save comrades, leaders making impossible decisions, engineers creating weapons of devastating power. Your species fights differently than any in the galaxy, Kix continued. Where our kind seek elegant solutions, minimize casualties and follow established protocols, humans improvise. You sacrifice, you use everything available no matter how crude or desperate. The void adapts to patterns. Your species doesn't rely on patterns. The insect alien stepped forward, clicking rapidly. TKL's KT says that in Concord simulations, humans are the only species with a predictive victory scenario against the void. Kix translated. Though the cost would be high. How high? The president asked. In successful simulations, humanity suffers 40% casualties. The room fell silent. And the alternative? Admiral Bell asked. Total extinction, Kix said. For all species. 3 days later, after emergency sessions of the United Nations and hasty agreements among world powers, humanity gave its answer. In orbit above Earth, Susan Bell stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, Earth's first and only space military vessel, as it prepared to join the conquered fleet. This is unprecedented, her second-in-command, Captain Roy Garcia, said quietly, beside her. We're going from being Earth's only starship to joining an interstellar war. We're just the advance team, Susan reminded him. Earth's factories are already retooling. Every shipyard is being converted. The first wave of real warships will join us in 6 months. The Concorde transport ship, nearly 20 times the size of the Defender, loomed in the viewscreen. Admiral, a communications officer called out, the Concorde vessel is requesting our weapons specifications and tactical databases for integration into their systems. Susan smiled thinly. Tell them they'll get what they need when we need them to have. Yet humanity hasn't survived this long by giving away all our secrets at once. As the Defender docked with the alien ship, Susan looked back at the blue-green planet below. Somewhere down there, her teenage son was watching the news, probably scared but proud. Somewhere else, Joe Morgan was likely still feeding his horses, wondering how his morning encounter had changed human history. They think they're getting attack dogs, Susan said quietly to Garcia. But they'll find out we're wolves. We protect our pack, we hunt as a team, and we're a lot smarter than they expect. The airlock opened, revealing Kix and a delegation of 7 different alien species. Susan straightened her uniform and stepped forward, her crew following behind. Welcome to the Galactic Concorde, humans, Kix said formally. You are the last to join and our last hope. Susan extended her hand in the human custom of greeting. Then let's not waste any time. Take us to this void. We have some ideas they haven't seen before. Behind her, the Earth continued its peaceful rotation, unaware that its most dangerous children were about to be unleashed upon the stars. Major Frank Williams had never expected to lead troops in space. 6 months after Earth joined the Galactic Concorde, he stood in a briefing room aboard the massive Concorde command ship, surrounded by aliens who still seemed uncomfortable with his presence. Let me get this straight, said Kaleth, the blue-skinned admiral of the Thanarian fleet. You want to attack the Void Hive node directly, without fleet support? Frank pointed to the holographic map showing the Arcturus system. The Void has adapted to your tactics. They expect ships fighting ships. They don't expect a small team to sneak past their defenses. And once there? Asked a tall, plant-like alien whose name Frank couldn't pronounce. We plant these, Frank said, pulling out a small metal cylinder from his pocket. Modified mining, explosives from Earth, adjusted to work with Concorde technology. We place them at these fault lines in the moon's crust and collapse the entire structure. Silence fell across the room. The aliens looked at each other, and what Frank had learned was an expression of shock. Your plan will destroy the entire moon, Kaleth finally said. That's the point, Frank replied. The hive node is the moon. We destroy the moon, we destroy the node. Such destruction, the plant alien whispered, is necessary, Frank finished firmly. The Void destroyed 2 of your colony worlds last month. We can't match their numbers in direct combat. We need to hit them where it hurts. Kaleth's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. The Concorde Council will never approve this level of planetary destruction. Frank picked up the explosive and put it back in his pocket. Then don't tell them. Tell them we're doing a reconnaissance mission. I only need 1 ship and my team. 2. Days later, Frank and his team of 12 humans boarded a small Concorde scout vessel. Lieutenant Diane Carter, his second-in-command, checked their equipment one last time. The aliens think we're crazy, she said quietly. Good, Frank replied. That means the Void won't expect this either. The mission was simple on paper. Approach the moon under stealth, land in a crater on the dark side, place the explosives at key locations, and get out before detonation. In practice, it meant navigating through a swarm of Void patrol ships that looked like giant black spiders, each one capable of detecting the smallest heat signature. As they approached the Arcturus system, their pilot, a quiet man named Steve Johnson, whistled softly. "That's a lot of void ships." The view screen showed hundreds of the spider-like vessels orbiting the gray moon that served as their hive node. The moon's surface pulsed with sickly green veins, the physical manifestation of the void's neural network. "New plan," Frank said suddenly. "Steve, can you match the heat signature of those void ships?" The pilot looked at him like he was insane. "Maybe, but they'll still see us." "Not if we look like one of them," Diane said, catching on to Frank's thinking. She pulled out a sample container from their equipment. Inside was a black oil-like substance, salvaged void biomass from a previous battlefield. "We coat the outer hull with this," she explained. "The void ships communicate partially through chemical signatures. This might mask us enough to get close." "That's insane," Steve said. "That's why it might work," Frank replied. "The conquered species can't try this. Their bodies have immediate toxic reactions to void biomass. But we've shown we can handle brief exposure." 4 hours later, their ship, now coated in a thin layer of void material, drifted slowly through the patrol perimeter. Each time a void ship approached, everyone held their breath. But each time the enemy vessel simply adjusted course and continued its patrol. "It's working," Diane whispered, though there was no need to be quiet in space. "They think we're one of them." They landed in a deep crater, the darkness hiding their approach from orbital sensors. Frank led his team out onto the lunar surface, their specially designed suits protecting them from both the vacuum of space and potential void contamination. "Remember," he said over the comm, "we have 40 minutes to plant all charges and return to the ship. Move fast but careful." The surface of the moon felt wrong under their boots. Instead of firm regolith, it seemed to pulse slightly, as if the entire moon was breathing. The green veins were everywhere, pulsing with energy that their sensors identified as both electrical and biological. They split into 4 teams, each heading to a different fault line identified by conquered geological surveys. Frank and Diane took the deepest site, requiring them to descend into a narrow crevasse that dropped nearly a kilometer into the moon's crust. "The void has completely taken over this place," Diane said as they climbed down. The walls of the crevasse were lined with the same neural structures they'd seen on the surface, but here they were denser, more organized. "That's why this plan will work," Frank replied. "The moon isn't just a base, it's a brain. We're going to give it a severe headache." At the bottom of the crevasse, they found what looked like a pool of black liquid, bubbling slightly despite the vacuum of space. Frank carefully placed his explosive package at the edge, where it adhered to the rock. "Charge 1 set," he reported over the comm. The other teams quickly confirmed their charges were also in place. As they climbed back up, Diane stopped suddenly. "Sir, the patterns are changing." Frank looked at the neural veins running along the wall. They were pulsing faster, and the color had shifted from green to a yellowish orange. "They know we're here," he said. "Move." By the time they reached the Yaoam surface, the entire moon seemed to be trembling. The black coating on their ship was beginning to bubble and smoke. "Everyone on board now," Frank ordered as the last team sprinted across the crater. Once inside, he slammed his hand on the detonator. "Control, get us out of here, Steve." The ship lifted off just as the first explosion shook the moon. Through the view screen, they watched as massive cracks spread across the lunar surface, green energy bursting out like blood from a wound. The void ships in orbit suddenly broke formation, rushing toward the moon as if trying to protect it. But it was too late. The chain reaction Frank had started couldn't be stopped. As their ship accelerated away from the Arcturus system, a final massive explosion tore the moon apart. The shockwave destroyed most of the void fleet caught in close orbit. Back at the Concord command ship, Kaleth and the other alien commanders watched in stunned silence as their sensors showed the complete destruction of the void hive node and nearly a third of the enemy fleet. "The humans did this?" asked the plant alien in disbelief. Kaleth's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. "Yes, and they did it with a single ship and 12 soldiers." When Frank's team returned, they were met not with celebration but with a mixture of awe and fear. Word of their success spread quickly through the conquered forces. The humans had arrived, and the war would never be the same. 6 months into the war, Captain Laura Reed stood on the bridge of her ship, the UES Defiant. It was one of 50 new warships Earth had produced and sent to join the conquered fleet. The Defiant wasn't as large or technologically advanced as the alien vessels, but it had something the others didn't: a human crew willing to try the impossible. "Status report," Laura said, looking at the massive neutron star that dominated the view screen. Her ship was hiding behind the third moon of a gas giant, waiting for the void fleet that intelligence said would pass through this system. "Void ships will arrive in approximately 20 minutes, replied her navigation officer. "Sensors detect 23 vessels, all heavy class." Laura studied the star map. The void fleet was following a predictable course, using the neutron star's gravity to slingshot toward the conquered colony world of Nevaria. The conquered commanders had positioned their main fleet near Nevaria, preparing for a direct confrontation that would likely cost thousands of lives. Laura had a different plan. "Send a message to Conquered Command," she ordered. "Tell them to hold their position. We're going to stop the void fleet here." Her communications officer, a young man named Eric Powell, looked up in surprise. "Ma'am, our orders are to observe and report only. We don't have clearance to engage a fleet of that size." Laura smiled grimly. "We're not going to engage them. Get me Kyle Hayes on the line." Minutes later, the face of Earth's most brilliant engineer appeared on the screen. Hayes had been working with conquered scientists, creating hybrid weapons by combining human innovation with alien technology. "Captain Reed," he said, his workspace visible behind him, cluttered with dismantled alien devices. "Please tell me you're calling about my new scatter pulse disruptors." "Not today," Laura replied. "I need to know if we can use the gravity tether to affect a neutron star." Kyle's eyes widened. "You want to do what now?" "The gravity tether was designed to move small asteroids for mining operations," Laura explained. "Can we use it on a star? Not to move the star itself, but to create a directed gravitational pulse?" Kyle typed rapidly on his computer. "Theoretically, yes, but the power requirements would be enormous. And if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, the consequences would be unpredictable." "Could it work?" Laura pressed. Kyle hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but you'd need to be within 5,000 kilometers of the star's surface. At that range, your shields would only hold for maybe 2 minutes. "That's all we need," Laura said. "Transmit the modifications to our tether system. We launch in 15 minutes. As soon as the connection ended, her second-in-command, Commander Paul Wilson, stepped closer. "Captain, with all due respect, you're talking about using a neutron star as a weapon. The Concorde has strict regulations about stellar manipulation." "They have regulations about a lot of things," Laura replied. "That's why they were losing this war before we arrived." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "I know what I'm asking is dangerous. If anyone wants to object officially, now is the time. I'll note it in my log, and there will be no repercussions." The bridge remained silent. "Very well," Laura said. "Battle stations." The Defiant moved out from behind the moon and accelerated toward the neutron star. On Earth, such a dense stellar object would have been called a pulsar, a rapidly spinning star that emitted precise beams of radiation from its poles. This particular star rotated once every 2.4 seconds, its deadly beams sweeping through space, like lighthouse beacons. "Time it carefully," Laura ordered as they approached. "We need to reach deployment position between pulses." The ship shuddered as they entered the star's immense gravitational field. Warning alarms blared as the shields strained against radiation levels that would have instantly killed everyone aboard without protection. "Void fleet has entered the system," reported the sensor officer. "They've detected us and are adjusting course." "They think we're on a suicide run," Laura said. "Good. Deploy the gravity tether on my mark." The Defiant positioned itself above the neutron star's north pole, directly in the path where its radiation beam would emerge in just over a second. "Ready, Captain," said the weapons officer, sweat beading on his forehead despite the environmental controls. "Deploy now." The gravity tether, a device that manipulated the fabric of spacetime itself, fired into the surface of the neutron star. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a slight distortion appeared, as if that section of the star was being pulled upward. "Full power to the engines," Laura ordered. "Get us out of here, maximum speed." The Defiant shot away from the star just as the radiation beam erupted. But instead of firing straight into space as it had for millions of years, the beam curved, following the distortion created by the gravity tether. Like a garden hose suddenly bent, the concentrated stream of particles and energy changed direction, directly toward the approaching void fleet. From a safe distance, Laura and her crew watched as the beam swept across the void ships. 3 were caught directly in its path and simply ceased to exist, vaporized instantly. The others were battered by the radiation wash, their systems failing as the beam continued to sweep across space in its new, artificially altered arc. "It worked," whispered Commander Wilson in awe. "It actually worked." But their victory was short-lived. As they watched, the neutron star's rotation began to destabilize. The carefully balanced cosmic object, suddenly forced to emit energy in an unnatural pattern, started to wobble on its axis. "Captain," called out the science officer, "the star is becoming unstable. Gravitational readings are fluctuating throughout the system." Laura knew what that meant. The delicate balance of the entire solar system would be disrupted. The planets would eventually be pulled from their orbits, rendering them uninhabitable. "Send a message to all ships in the system," she ordered quietly. "Recommend immediate evacuation of all outposts and research stations. Transmit all data to Concord Command." 3 days later, Laura stood before the Concord Supreme Command. High Counselor Zithvar, a tall, gray-skinned alien with 6 eyes arranged in a circle around its head, looked down at her from a raised platform. "Captain Reed," Zithvar said, its voice translated through Laura's earpiece. "You have saved millions of lives by preventing the void attack on Nevaria. But your actions have potentially rendered 3 planets uninhabitable for millennia." Laura stood straight, her hands clasped behind her back. "With respect, Counselor, we're not fighting for real estate. We're fighting for survival." Murmurs spread through the chamber, some approving, others clearly outraged. The division between human methods and Concord ethics was growing deeper by the day. "The Concord has existed for 12,000 years, said another counselor. "In all that time we have never used a star as a weapon." "That," Laura replied simply, "is why you were losing." As she was escorted from the chamber, Laura received a message on her personal device. It was from Admiral Bell back on Earth. "Well done, Captain. Controversial, but effective. Keep it up. Bell." The humans were changing the war, and the galaxy would never be the same. The war reached its turning point 1 year after humanity joined the fight. The Void, perhaps sensing the changing tide, launched a massive assault on the conquered homeworlds. Their strategy was clear: eliminate the leadership, throw the Alliance into chaos, and then mop up the remaining resistance. Commander Gregory Harris stood in the Concord Central Command Room, watching as red alert signals flashed across the giant holographic display. 7 conquered homeworlds were under simultaneous attack. The room was filled with alien leaders shouting orders and arguing tactics. "This is a coordinated strike," Gregory said, cutting through the noise. "The Void has never attempted something this complex before." High Counselor Zithvar turned all 6 of his eyes toward Gregory. "The Conquered fleet is spread too thin. We cannot defend all worlds at once." "Then we don't try to," Gregory replied. He stepped forward and manipulated the holographic controls, zooming in on the Void fleet approaching Zithvar's homeworld of Malcoria. "We let them come closer." "Closer?" The plant-like counselor, whom Gregory had learned was named Flora, waved her leaf arms in distress. "There are billions of civilians on these worlds." "I'm not suggesting we abandon them," Gregory said firmly. "I'm suggesting we stop fighting by your rules and start fighting by ours." After a tense silence, Zithvar spoke. "What do you propose, Commander?" "Unrestricted human warfare protocols," Gregory answered. The room fell silent. Every alien present knew what that meant. tactics that violated virtually every ethical standard the Concord had upheld for millennia. The Concord Charter explicitly forbids, began one counselor. The Concord will cease to exist if these worlds fall, Gregory interrupted. Your conventional defenses are failing. You need to decide what matters more, your rules or your people. Zithvar's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign Gregory had learned indicated deep thought. Finally, the High Counselor spoke. The Supreme. Command hereby authorizes unrestricted human warfare protocols. May the stars forgive us. Within an hour, Gregory was aboard the human carrier UES Valiant, coordinating with human commanders across conquered space. The plan was brutal but effective. Let the void fleets approach their targets closely, then hit them with everything humanity had developed over the past year. Near Malcoria, Lieutenant Sharon Russell led a team planting antimatter mines in the heavily populated transit zones, areas normally considered too dangerous to militarize due to civilian traffic. All civilian ships had been grounded, but the conquered representatives were still visibly uncomfortable as they watched the operation. Your species embraces self-sacrifice in ways we cannot comprehend, noted Keeks, the crystalline alien who had first contacted Earth. He stood beside Sharon as volunteers loaded the last of the specialized phase-shift bombs onto small one-person craft. Not because we want to die, Sharon explained, watching the volunteers, each one knowing they would not return, but because we want others to live more. The volunteers, 20 humans piloting ships barely larger than escape pods, launched toward the Void Fleet. Each carried a prototype weapon that would create a localized distortion in space-time, crushing everything within half a kilometer into a point smaller than an atom. They will be remembered, Kik said softly as the tiny ships disappeared into the darkness. Back on Earth, the Void had made a fatal mistake. A splinter fleet, perhaps hoping to cut off the supply of human reinforcements, launched a direct assault on humanity's homeworld. Colonel Ben Murphy, commanding Earth's orbital defenses, faced an impossible situation. The approaching Void Armada outnumbered his defense fleet 5-1. Conventional weapons would not be enough. Get me the president, he ordered from his command post on the lunar base. When the connection was established, he laid out his plan. There was a long silence from the other end. That's Jupiter's smallest moon you're talking about, the president finally said. You're sure there's no other way? No other way that saves Earth, Ben replied grimly. Another pause, then, you have authorization, God help us all. 6 hours later, as the Void Fleet crossed the orbit of Mars, Ben gave the order. Nuclear charges placed deep within the crust of Jupiter's moon, Amalthea, detonated simultaneously. The small celestial body, just 167 kilometers in diameter, shattered into millions of pieces. The explosion itself wasn't the weapon, it was what followed. The debris, accelerated by the blast and further propelled by specially positioned thrusters, formed a moving wall of rock and ice traveling at tremendous speed directly into the path of the oncoming Void Fleet. From Earth, people watched as a new light appeared in the night sky, the debris field catching the sun's rays as it spread outward from Jupiter. Hours later, they witnessed flashes of light as the Void ships were shredded by the uncountable fragments moving at orbital velocities. The astronomical devastation was visible across the solar system. On the conquered command ship, Zithvar watched the sensor readings in stunned silence before remarking to his council, "We feared humans because they would burn worlds to win a war. We never considered what they would do when their own world was threatened. Not a single Void ship reached Earth." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as humanity's desperation tactics turned the tide. Disabled Void ships were captured, and then accelerated into larger enemy vessels as kinetic weapons. Human soldiers in experimental shielding suits boarded Void command ships on what were essentially suicide missions. Engineers like Kyle Hayes deployed his scatter pulse disruptors that targeted the Void's neural networks with increasing effectiveness as they learned to tune the frequencies. But perhaps the most significant moment came from an unexpected source. Dr. Alan Cooper, who had been working in secret despite the Concord Ethical Committee's ongoing debates, completed his bioweapon targeted specifically at the Void's central consciousness. Cooper's team had taken captured Void biological material and modified it to attack the hive mind itself, essentially creating a virus that would spread through the Void's own neural network. "It's ready," he told Commander Olivia Brooks, who had been assigned to his project despite official disapproval. "But the delivery mechanism is the problem. We need to release it directly into the central Void consciousness hub." Olivia studied the star charts. "The hub is in the Proxima Centauri system, heavily defended by at least 200 Void ships. Then we'll need a small, fast team," Cooper said. Olivia nodded. "I'll lead it myself." 2 days later, as battles raged across Concord space, Olivia led a team of just 6 humans in a stolen Void ship modified to carry Cooper's bioweapon. Using the same biomass camouflage technique that Major Williams had pioneered, they slipped past the Void defenses around Proxima Centauri. The central hub was even more terrifying than intelligence had suggested, an entire planet consumed by Void matter, pulsing with sickly green light that extended into space itself. "This is it," Olivia told her team as they prepared to launch the bioweapon. "Remember, once we release this, we have exactly 8 minutes to get clear before it activates." What none of them said was that escaping through hundreds of enemy ships in 8 minutes was likely impossible. This was, for all intents and purposes, another suicide mission. As the bioweapon launched toward the planet's surface, the stolen Void ship turned and accelerated away at maximum speed. Behind them, something unexpected happened. The bioweapon, designed to spread gradually through the neural network, reacted with the concentrated consciousness in ways Cooper hadn't predicted. The entire planet seemed to convulse, sending out a psychic scream that affected every Void entity connected to the network. Across the galaxy, Void ships suddenly stopped in mid-battle. Some simply drifted powerless in space. Others began attacking each other in apparent confusion. The cascade had destroyed over 60% of the Void neural network in a single strike. The war ended not with peace talks but with extinction. 3 months after Olivia Brooks deployed Dr. Cooper's bioweapon, the last organized Void resistance collapsed. Scattered Void ships cut off from their central consciousness were hunted, down one by one. The enemy that had nearly destroyed the Concord was gone, but victory came at a terrible cost. 17 conquered worlds were rendered uninhabitable. Billions had died. And the galaxy itself bore the scars of humanity's desperate warfare, destabilized stars, shattered moons, and entire regions contaminated by experimental weapons. On the B. Concord Central Station, Admiral Susan Bell sat alone in her quarters, staring at the casualty reports. Earth had suffered too. The Void's attack on the solar system had been repelled, but not before Mars colony was destroyed and millions killed, on Earth itself. Yet humanity had lost proportionally fewer lives than any conquered species, because humans had been willing to do what the others wouldn't. A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Keeks, the crystalline alien who had first visited Earth seeking help, stepped into the room. Over the past year and a half, his crystalline body had developed cracks and discolorations, battle scars Susan had learned that his species bore as visible records of their service. "Admiral," Keeks said, "the Concord Supreme Council requests your presence." Susan nodded and stood up. She straightened her uniform, now adorned with unfamiliar Concord medals alongside her Earth decorations. Together they walked through the massive space station, passing aliens of all 17 Concord species. Susan noticed how they moved aside. As she approached, their reactions a mixture of respect, awe, and unmistakable fear. The Supreme Council chamber was a vast circular room with seats arranged in tiered rings. High Counselor Zithvar occupied the central position, his gray skin now paler than when Susan had first met him. "Admiral Bell," he greeted her formally. "Please approach." Susan walked to the center of the chamber, aware of the hundreds of eyes watching her. "The war is over," Zithvar announced, his translated voice echoing through the chamber. "The Void has been eliminated as a threat to galactic civilization, and we owe this victory, at least in substantial part, to humanity. Murmurs filled the chamber, not all of them approving. Humanity's methods were extreme, continued another counselor. Many of us questioned whether the cost was too high. But we cannot question the results, Zithvar cut in. And now we must decide humanity's place in the post-war galaxy. Susan stood straight, her hands clasped behind her back. With respect, counselor, humanity's place is for humanity to decide. We joined this war as equals, not as subordinates. Equals? A plant-like counselor's leaves rustled, and what Susan had learned was their equivalent of incredulous laughter. Your species was confined to a single system before we uplifted you. And that was your choice, Susan replied calmly. Just as it was our choice to save you when you came asking for help. The chamber fell silent. Susan continued, choosing her words carefully. You called us the last resort because you feared what we might become. You were right to fear us. But remember this. We fight hardest for those we consider family. Today, that includes all of you. She looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of alien representatives one by one. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We don't want to force our ways on others. But we will never again accept being contained, monitored, or treated as less than equals. Zithvar's 6 eyes blinked in their sequential pattern. What does humanity want, Admiral Bell? A full seat on this council, unrestricted access to conquered technology and knowledge, and the right to settle new worlds beyond our solar system. The chamber erupted in voices, some protesting, others supportive. Zithvar raised a hand and silence gradually returned. And if we refuse? Asked a counselor from the upper tier. Susan smiled thinly. Then we go our separate ways, but consider this. The void may be gone, but the galaxy is vast. There will be other threats. Would you rather have humanity as an ally or as something else? The implied threat hung in the air. Everyone present had seen what humans were capable of when threatened. After a long silence, Zithvar spoke. The Concord Supreme Council will recess to consider Admiral Bell's proposal. 2 days later, Susan received their answer. Humanity would be granted everything they asked for: full membership in the Concord, access to all technology and knowledge, and the right to expand beyond their solar system. In return, humanity would share their own innovations and help create a new defensive force to protect the rebuilt Concord. 5 years passed. The galaxy slowly healed from the war's devastation. Humans spread to a dozen new worlds, bringing their unique blend of innovation, art, and restless energy. The initial fear that many alien species felt toward humans gradually transformed into cautious respect, and in some cases, genuine friendship. On Zithvar's home planet of Malcoria, a memorial was erected to commemorate those lost in the war. The central monument depicted figures of all 18 species working together, with a simple inscription, "United against the darkness." But it was another memorial, smaller and less grand, that perhaps better captured the new galactic understanding. On a quiet hill overlooking the rebuilt capital city, a stone tablet bore the words, "We feared humans would destroy the galaxy. Instead, they saved it by being willing to destroy themselves." Admiral Ryan Foster, who had succeeded Susan Bell as Earth's representative on the Concord Council, stood at this memorial on the anniversary of the war's end. Beside him stood his alien colleagues, representatives of species that had once considered humans too dangerous to join galactic society. A message interrupted the solemn moment. Reports of a new aggressive species emerging at the galaxy's edge, destroying a Concord observation post. "The council is assembling to discuss diplomatic options," said Flora, now a senior counselor. Ryan nodded but didn't immediately move. "Send a ship to the border," he said calmly. "A human ship." 3 days later, a single Earth vessel approached the fleet of the new potential threat. Captain Lisa Ward transmitted a simple message, along with detailed recordings of the Void War, showing precisely what humanity had done to the last species that threatened the galaxy. "The galaxy is under human protection," she stated clearly. "We are the last resort. Proceed accordingly." The alien fleet retreated without firing a shot, having seen what happens when a galaxy burns. As news of this bloodless victory spread, Zithvar summoned Ryan to a private meeting. 5 years ago, the aged counselor said, "I feared we had made a terrible mistake by giving humanity so much power." "And now?" Ryan asked. Zithvar's 6 eyes blinked slowly. "Now I understand something your Admiral Bell once told me. Humans don't just fight wars, they end them, sometimes through destruction, but when possible, through the mere threat of what you might do." Ryan smiled. "We prefer the second option." "As do we all," Zithvar agreed. "The galaxy has changed, Admiral Foster, and perhaps, for the first time in my long life, I can say it has changed for the better." As night fell over Malcoria, the stars shone down on a galaxy at peace. A peace guaranteed not by treaties or technology, but by the species once considered too violent to join galactic society. The last resort had become the first line of defense, and the galaxy was safer for it.